Welcome to Debate the News True Crime. I'm Joseph Lobosco, and with me is my amazing co-host Adrienne Barker. Tonight we're examining the chilling case of Ana Walshe, a 39-year-old mother of three from Massachusetts who vanished on New Year's Day 2023, never to be seen alive again. Her disappearance would soon lead investigators to focus on her husband, Brian Walshe, and ultimately to a murder conviction that has everyone talking.
I'm Adrienne Barker. Before we begin, a warning to our listeners. This episode involves discussions of murder and domestic violence, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. And if you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. We approach the story with respect for the victim, Ana Walshe. May she rest in peace.
And a quick disclaimer, Adrienne and I are not attorneys, law enforcement officials, or psychologists. We research each case thoroughly, but this show is recorded live with minimal editing, and any factual errors are unintentional. And remember, any individuals we discuss who haven't been convicted of a crime are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
With that said, let's get into the story of Ana Walshe's disappearance and the case against her husband, Brian Walshe. It's a case that unfolds over nearly 3 years, from a missing persons report to a no-body murder conviction. And that's nobody, B-O-D-Y. And it raises tough questions about evidence, justice, and what happens when the unthinkable occurs close to home.
On January 1st, 2023, 39-year-old Ana Walshe was reportedly last seen in the early morning hours at her home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, a wealthy suburb. According to her husband, Brian Walshe, she left around 4 a.m. for a quote-unquote work emergency, supposedly catching a rideshare to Boston's Logan Airport for a flight to Washington, D.C. In truth, investigators later found no evidence of any Uber or Lyft picking her up that day. Ana never boarded any flight and would not ever be seen alive again.
At first, no one realized Ana was missing. And it wasn't until January 4th of 2023, when she failed to show up for work in Washington, that her employer reported her disappearance to police. And that same day, officers conducted a well check at the Walshe's home. And they noticed something odd. The back seats of Brian's Volvo were folded down with a plastic liner covering the cargo area. And Brian, he claims he hadn't heard from Ana and even left a voicemail for a friend saying she'd been out of touch for days, adding that everything is fine, he said. He's sure everything is fine, but the circumstances were far from fine, and a search for Ana was about to begin.
Law enforcement launched a large-scale search around the Walshe property and the nearby woods on January 5th and 6th. Dozens of officers, canine units, and a state police helicopter scoured the area in frigid winter conditions. They found no trace of Ana. By nightfall on January 7th, authorities suspended the ground search. Behind the scenes, however, investigators were already uncovering alarming clues about Brian's activities in the days immediately following Ana's disappearance.
While everyone else was worried about Ana, Brian was behaving very suspiciously. And on New Year's Day, Brian had used his son's iPad to make a series of chilling Google searches. He looked up terms like how long before a body starts to smell, 10 ways to dispose of a body if you really needed to, and he searched how long for someone to be missing to inherit, among many other queries. And the following day, which was January 2nd, Brian continued researching horrifying topics such as dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. These searches, later revealed by prosecutors, it suggested a grim plan taking shape, even as Ana's fate was still unknown.
Brian's suspicious behavior wasn't limited to internet searches. Investigators discovered that on January 2nd, 2023, just one day after Ana disappeared, Brian went on a peculiar shopping trip. Surveillance video showed him at Home Depot in Rockland wearing a black surgical mask and blue gloves, buying about $450 worth of items, including mops, buckets, tarps, tape, a Tyvek protective suit, and even a hatchet. He paid cash, an obvious attempt to avoid leaving a trail. Then, on January 3rd, surveillance footage showed Brian lugging heavy trash bags to dumpsters at multiple apartment complexes in the area, seemingly disposing of incriminating evidence from the crime scene.
And on January 8th, police executed a search warrant at the Walshe residence. And in the basement, they found blood and a damaged, blood-stained knife, evidence that later confirmed to be Anna's. They also observed that Brian's car appeared to have been recently cleaned, and subsequent testing found traces of blood in the car. And that same day, Brian was arrested and charged with misleading investigators. He had told police a cockamamie story about Anna's supposed departure and about running errands on January 1st. Those claims were quickly disproved by the detectives when there were no receipts and no surveillance footage, so nothing could verify his alibi. And a judge set Brian's bail at $500,000 cash on the misleading charge.
The next day, January 9th, investigators followed the trash trail that Brian had left behind. At a garbage transfer station in Peabody, they made a gruesome discovery: trash bags filled with blood-soaked evidence. Inside the bags were a hatchet, a hacksaw, heavy-duty cleaning supplies, a blood-stained rug, and even Anna's COVID-19 vaccination card. It was devastating evidence suggesting Ana had been murdered and dismembered, her remains callously thrown away like garbage. Investigators even searched an incinerator for any further remains, but found nothing. By then, any hope of finding Ana alive had evaporated.
As this forensic evidence piled up, prosecutors moved quickly. And on January 17th of 2023, just over 2 weeks after Anna's disappearance, Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey announced that Brian Walshe will be charged with his wife's murder and with improperly transporting her remains. Brian was brought into court the next day and formally arraigned on the murder charges on January 18th. And in that hearing, prosecutors laid out the key elements of their case, from Brian's incriminating internet searches to the store surveillance footage and the bloody items recovered from the trash. And Brian, through his attorney, pleaded not guilty and was ordered held without bail pending trial.
With Brian behind bars, the investigation continued to develop in the ensuing months. In March 2023, a grand jury indicted him on all the charges: first-degree murder, misleading investigators, and improper conveyance of a body, confirmation that the case would move forward to trial. Around that time, disturbing pieces of backstory emerged. It turned out that in 2014, years before, Ana had told Washington, D.C. police that Brian threatened to kill her and her friends, though she ultimately refused to cooperate and no charges were actually filed. And investigators later revealed that on January 7, 2023, one day before Brian's arrest, a phony ransom note had been emailed to authorities in a clumsy attempt to throw off the investigation. Allegedly. At least that's what prosecutors thought. Each new revelation painted an even darker picture of Brian's behavior.
And as the murder case marched towards trial, Brian faced other legal troubles. In a separate federal fraud case, he was sentenced in February of 2024 to 37 months in prison for selling fake Andy Warhol paintings. Andy Warhol paintings. Wow. Oh my. He had been under home confinement awaiting sentencing in that art fraud case when Ana disappeared. And meanwhile, in the murder prosecution, there were a few delays and twists. And by late 2024, the judge that was originally assigned to the case was replaced. And in September of 2025, Brian was even attacked by another inmate and briefly hospitalized, prompting a psychiatric evaluation. And within weeks, doctors deemed him competent to stand trial and the proceedings resumed. And nearly 2 years after Anna vanished, the stage was finally set for the trial to begin.
In November 2025, jury selection got underway for Brian Walsh's murder trial in Dedham, Massachusetts. Before opening statements, Brian made a last-minute move on two of the lesser charges. He pleaded guilty to improperly disposing of Anna's body and to lying to police, presumably hoping to show some acceptance of responsibility on those counts. Importantly, he maintained his plea of not guilty on the central charge of murder. By November 20th, 2025, a full panel of jurors had been seated, and the trial proper began shortly thereafter.
Over about 2 weeks of testimony, the prosecution laid out a compelling and chilling narrative. And jurors heard about Brian's Google searches for things like the best way to dispose of a body. And can you be charged with murder without a body? His secret shopping trips for cleaning supplies, the blood evidence in the washroom and car, and the bags of gruesome debris recovered from dumpsters. They also learned that Anna's body had never been found, a sobering fact that did not stop the state from pursuing a murder conviction. And the defense, for its part, did not call any witnesses. And Brian's attorneys argued that he hadn't killed Anna at all, claiming instead that he panicked and hid her body after discovering she died suddenly on her own, and that all his lies and bizarre actions were done out of fear, not guilt. But with no evidence of an accidental death and a mountain of evidence pointing to foul play, that explanation fell flat.
The jury deliberated for roughly 6 hours over 2 days. On December 5th, 2025, they returned with a verdict. Brian Walsh was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Anna. This conviction meant the jury agreed the killing was premeditated and intentional. Brian showed little emotion as the verdict was read. With the most serious charge decided, only the formal sentencing remained.
And on December 18th of 2025, Brian Walsh was back in court to face judgment. First-degree murder in Massachusetts carries a mandatory penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. And Judge Diane Frenier duly imposed that sentence. And in delivering her remarks, the judge called Brian's actions barbaric and incomprehensible, noting how he dismembered his wife's body and disposed of her remains in multiple area dumpsters, effectively throwing her away like garbage. She emphasized the colossal waste of investigative resources caused by Brian's lies and the profound trauma inflicted on the Walsh's three young sons, who now will grow up without their mother.
In addition to the life term for murder, Judge Frenier ordered additional consecutive sentences for Brian's other offenses, up to 20 years for misleading investigators and up to 3 years for illegally disposing of Anna's remains. These extra penalties are largely symbolic on top of a life sentence, but they underscore the severity of his attempts to cover up his crimes. Before the court adjourned, Anna's family members provided emotional victim impact statements. Anna's sister described an unbearable emptiness in the lives of those Anna left behind, especially 3 little boys who must now grow up without their mother's love. After the final gavel, Brian Walsh, now a convicted murderer, was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. The long, painful saga from Anna's mysterious New Year's disappearance to the exhaustive investigation, the courtroom drama, and finally justice served had at last reached its conclusion. All right, Adrienne, this case is nuts. I mean, this guy claims his wife got into an Uber in the middle of the night on New Year's Day and went off to work, and yet they find no evidence that an Uber ride ever took place. They wind up doing a trash pull, finding all these bloody tools. I mean, it's just, I don't even know what to make of this. What are your thoughts?
What a coward. Brian Walsh, I'll say it. This is Adrienne Barker. You're a freaking coward. Okay, really. I don't even understand how he obviously has no empathy. Didn't care about his 3 children, did he? Did he? No. because he got rid of the wife, the mother of his 3 children, and then where are they? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I I think absolutely I'm so glad he got charged for misleading the investigation too, because that's a crime right there too. What he did, he can't be a human being. So you're a monster. You're a cowardly monster who absolutely murdered his wife. Oh, wait, I just have to add one more. Sorry. You are a dumbass coward because you're searching on your Google like you really think your story is going to hold up and nobody's going to look at your iPad and your Google search. Really? Because that's pretty idiotic in itself. Sorry. It feels good to get the anger out.
No, Adrian, I wholeheartedly agree. And he searched that on his kid's iPad. So like even more diabolical. Searching for how to dispose of a body. Like it's just like, yes, you said it perfectly. He's guilty and he's an absolute idiot. But so he did claim though that he didn't actually kill her. He found her dead and he panicked. And that's why he disposed of her body. So that leaves the question to the audience. Do you think Brian Walsh actually murdered his wife? Or do you believe him that he found her already dead, panicked, and then disposed of the body because he was scared? What do you guys think?
I believe that he actually killed his wife. All the evidence that they found with the text and the Google searches, there's no other answer. He gave it away. So, yes, I believe it. I believe he killed his wife.
This is Lauren. I totally believe he killed his wife. From the moment I heard the story, the moment you're reading it, it's just it doesn't make sense. Why would you Google? Why would you go to the store and buy 5,000 mops and all that? Why would you carry the bags? Nothing shows that he did not do it. And it just leads up to the crime. If you're supposed to be married to someone, you're supposed to have love and compassion, even through arguments or whatever would lead to this situation of the murder. You know, if you love someone, you don't go and Google stuff on dismemberment, and that's just weird. Why would you do that? Yeah, he killed her.
I just want to say that 75% of spouses and partners do find that their loved one may have passed and maybe it was a heart attack. I can't imagine, like, oh, my spouse just passed away and now I'm going to panic because I'm fearful. Like, what? That is the loserest excuse I have ever heard. Like, that one is just really, when they came up with that one, I'm sure that the attorneys even giggled with themselves, thinking, you think anyone would buy that? No, nobody bought that. That is ridiculous. If you find someone that's passed away, you call 911. You don't cut them into, and oh, I can't even go there too. The whole dismemberment. What?
I love the creativeness of these murderers. It's just ridiculous.
Exactly. And the only time I can think
Uh,
of where I've ever heard about someone actually coming across a body that they didn't kill and then having to dispose of it is like in a movie or a TV show. Like that usually doesn't happen in real life.
exactly. It was totally premeditated. And then you're going to go in the store and buy all these items all at the same time. And then you're going to put them all in the dumpster or whatever, all at the same time. Like, yeah, dumb. He needs to be on World's Dumbest Criminals.
Let's highlight the fact that he went to the hardware store with a mask and gloves on. Yeah, I'm going to go shop that way now on. That's perfect.
Yeah, right.
And then let me just leave the broken bloodstained knife in my basement. You know, families deserve a body. They deserve to be able to bury their daughter and their sister and mother, and that he stole that. Again, he's someone that he stole the life and then he made it worse. The deep disrespect that this man has.
Oh, yeah. And my laughter goes to the world's dumbest criminal again. So just to clarify that. But when you spoke about the knife, yeah, yeah, that's just crazy. Sad.
Hey, Joseph, refresh my memory. I know we just said that, but what was the fraud case?
So Brian Walsh had previously been arrested for all sorts of different things. Basically, what happened was he had a friend living in another country, And he got into an agreement with this individual to sell that person's family's original artwork. This individual that he was friends with, his family had 2 Andy Warhol shadow paintings, a Warhol dollar sign painting, and 2 Keith Harington prints. They entered into an agreement where Brian would sell those paintings and then remit the money, and I'm assuming take a commission. What happened was he left with the paintings and all of a sudden stopped answering phone calls. And what he did was he didn't even sell the paintings and keep the money. What he did was he used those real paintings to create replicas, fake paintings that he then sold on eBay. And that basically was the base of the prosecution's case. He pleaded guilty, and he was actually sentenced to 37 months in jail for those charges. So that's just some background. We're dealing with a full-blown criminal here.
Dumbest criminal.
The dumbest. You know, it's interesting. So my family has art galleries, and I remember my dad sharing this story because he also thought it was the dumbest thing ever to the fact that he also didn't have the right authentication stamps, and he took the replicas and he used like the canvas and the staples, and they were new. Like, dude, you got to know how to like do it correctly. Like he just sucked at anything that he was going to do. And I'm not really laughing. Anna's family, it's a tragic and it's so sad. But he really was a dum dum.
And that kind of connects a little bit to what was the motive. So he was ordered to pay, I think, somewhere around like $500,000 roughly in restitution. I believe they were having financial problems. So it's been speculated that maybe he murdered her for her life insurance policies, which the amount varies depending on what reporting you read, but it could have been up to $2 million that he could have received from her life insurance policies. So some people think that's why he killed her. Other people think he killed her because it is confirmed that Ana Walshe was having an affair. He claims he didn't know about it, but the prosecution claims that basically she was going to tell him about the affair that weekend, over that holiday weekend. So other people theorize she told him or he found out on his own and he killed her as a result. What do you guys think about the motive? I think they're both very plausible.
I actually have to say it's getting old to kill because you think you're going to get the inheritance or the life insurance policy, whatever it looks like. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. And especially when you do it the way he did it. So I just don't understand why you can't just, I want a divorce and get your divorce and get out of there because there's only 3 people that he should be thinking about. And those are his 3 children. I think they're 3 sons. That should be the only thing that was on this guy's mind. If he was worried about his wife and a divorce and all of that, who would get the children? He literally could care less about his own children.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's completely cold-blooded and just it's insane. So, would this case have played out differently if the roles were reversed? If it was a wife dismembering her husband and then claiming she was afraid and she panicked?
First of all, I don't I mean, I've never done it. I've only seen it on TV. It looks like a heck of a lot of work. Way too much work that I'd ever want to do. So I don't see a woman, she'd have to really be a stone killer to take someone that, again, no matter how you feel about that person, you had children together. That's the mother of your children. These were his biological children?
Yes, I believe so.
Thanks. Yeah. So I seem to have trouble wrapping my head around that. And I absolutely want to say that if the roles were reversed, it wouldn't be because a woman would not do that because we're not that stupid. We're not going to make more of a work. We're just going to call 911 and come up with a better excuse than to try to hide in 20 different, multiple apartment complexes. And let me just remind everyone of one word. I'm going to just say this word. Think about it, sleep about it. Wake up and say the word cameras. The minute you step out of your house, or even in your house, cameras. You're always going to be watched. So, cameras. That's my word of the day.
I agree with you, Adrienne. I don't think it would play out the same way. I think women are definitely smarter than men. So I don't think if it was a woman, they would have made as many mistakes. And I mean, women tend to kill differently, like poisoning, stuff like that. So no, if the roles were reversed, I don't think it would have played out the same. So let's talk about why this case got so much attention. If Anna hadn't been married to a rich white collar fraudster, do you think this case would have gotten as much attention as it did, or do you think it would have largely flown under the radar?
I do think that it was a couple of things. Yes, that he's a professional with money. I also think in my heart to Massachusetts Supreme Court Judge Diane Frenear, what she said and how she said it, I think helps to bring it all together, but also shines a spotlight on it. I think the area you said it's a very wealthy community, but it would probably make the news anyways because of the human dignity and how he just completely offended the defendant's action, how he treated his wife, just the whole thing. So I think that all of that really made this something that went all over the news. And Anna was beautiful. What a beautiful, beautiful woman. And she didn't deserve, she just like nobody deserves this. So I think that that's why it really came to light. And the fact, it makes people question, I guess, if you were married and you did have a $2.7 million life insurance policy, I always thought it was kind of like a joke, right? That, loved ones say to each other, oh, you probably killed me for for my life insurance policy. And, oh, no, of course not. And that would not even be, that's like a joke. But in this case, he was really motivated by the money. And I guess if she was having an affair, there's plenty of ways to handle it without killing someone. So I think all of that together really put this in the news.
Definitely think that the fact that Cohasset, Massachusetts is a very wealthy town, I think that is an angle that, of course, the news is going to pick up on. But yeah, I agree with you. I think just the bizarreness of his story and how little sense it made, plus the fact that he already had a criminal record for this like art heist, which that in and of itself is kind of a story. I think those factors all combine to make this maybe a little bit more newsworthy in the press's eyes to your average case.
Joseph, he was accused of going into the home of his late father and selling his father's art and rugs and jewelry and maybe even the home itself. This was really a crime against the entire art community, what he did.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that angle too, actually, Adrian. Like, how common is art theft? And like, do you know what are some of the steps that you have to go through when you're in the art world to make sure you don't buy a painting like that or sell a painting like that? Can you give any insight on that?
Yes, so absolutely. Authentication is absolutely number one for my family's art gallery. Any Disney art would have the correct certificate of authenticity that would show you what the number is. Sign would have detailed information. Sometimes you would even have a picture of the artist actually signing that piece. So there's a variety of ways depending on who the artist is. You would know before you purchase an Andy Warhol. And that's what happened, right? Someone goes to purchase it on eBay, and a lot of art is purchased on eBay, and then doesn't receive the authentication, the stamp and the certification letter. So that right there is a red flag. And what can you do? Because at the end of the day, there's no value to it. Now you've got to try to find someone to even value it, but you really need that information. That is so important. Just like for any kind of expensive watch or anything that's a limited edition or collectible, you have to have proof of it being authentic. So, yeah, was he also called a sociopath at one point? I feel like in the news that he was called a sociopath. So he wasn't someone that was even liked in his community, if I'm correct.
Yeah, well, I would definitely call him a sociopath, much like Bruce Pardo and many of the other nut jobs we cover on this podcast. I think he's definitely a sociopath because sociopaths are like basically like the psychopath's like dumber, sloppier cousin. A psychopath would have had the same lack of empathy, a lack of empathy, and would be able to carry this out and lie about it and not feel bad about it. But they probably would have covered their tracks a little bit better. The fact that he was so sloppy and left all this evidence around, didn't really think through his stories, that is why I think he's a sociopath. And I am not a psychologist and have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's my theory. I would definitely call him a sociopath.
Yep. Really, ladies, we have to, or anyone, we have to know who our partner is. Do some research, double check them because we see the worst. But Joseph, what I hated about the story, what I really, really hated about the story was the fact that the three children had to go into the foster care system. It's not like all of a sudden, like a family member or honest sister can say, like, okay, I'm going to take the children. There is a process. And so those children, imagine their mother, the police, all of this going on with their father, and then they're put into a foster home. And hopefully they were able to keep the three boys together. I did check, and it looks like they're still trying to get a family member to adopt them all together. But horrible, horrible to do that to children. Just traumatic.
Exactly. Completely selfish and clearly only thought about himself. Never stopped and thought, maybe I shouldn't murder my wife because then they're going to be left without a mom. He was all about himself.
And by the way, you can't just say, "Oh, they were picked up by Uber," because guess what? Uber tracks everything. It is so easy to find out, who took what and where and who picked up. I mean, it is all data, that is information that can be received. So that was like the first stupidity, is to say, "Oh, she caught an Uber or a Lyft." I got to stay calm because this story really is upsetting me.
And that's what makes me think that the motive about him finding out about the affair or her telling him about the affair, I kind of think that could be the motive, because based on the way he tried to cover it up, that doesn't tell me that he had been plotting this out for months and months. It seems like it just happened and then he kind of was scrambling to figure out what to do. So I think that, yeah, maybe he saw her phone, found out about the affair. The boyfriend had texted her that night, so it's possible that he saw that. Or it's possible that they had a little bit too much champagne and she decided to just let him know that she was having an affair that night, and then he killed her. But I guess we'll never know.
Well, he wasn't convicted of a crime of passion, and that is good. The trial and the verdict established the killing as a premeditated act. So we're on to you, dude. We know it wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't like you just found out and that's what drove you crazy. You were premeditated and planning this.
Yeah, that's true. But that premeditation, technically, it could have been an hour between when he found out and when he decided to kill her. As long as he had that moment to pause and think through his decision and then continue with the act, I think that's really all you need for premeditation. But you're right. Yeah, it definitely was not a crime of passion.
Interesting. If any of our listeners have any information or want to share, please send us a comment. And by the way, we are live on Chatter Social. That is why you're hearing beautiful voices in the background. You can be on the show live too. Just download the app called Chatter Social, Blue Bubbles, and come into our room, DTN True Crime. We are recording after the first of the year, and that'll be Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. So we'd love to have more voices in the room, but thank you to everyone that is here. And I don't even have any lessons. The lessons are this: know who you're married to, watch your back, and my gosh, stay safe. It's a crazy world out there, and things just feel like they're getting crazier. And my love and respect to Anna and her family and what they've had to go through. And I hate to say that this may be a lesson, but her story may save someone else that may be in a similar position. So stay safe, please, everyone. Just, you can't be naive in today's world.
Yep, absolutely, Adrienne. So as we conclude this episode, we're left with a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because justice finally caught up with Brian Walsh, a calculating murderer whose lies unraveled under the weight of evidence, ensuring he can never harm anyone again. Sorrow because no verdict can ever bring back Ana Walsh, a vibrant mother daughter, and friend was taken in a horrific manner, leaving an irreplaceable void in the lives of her children and the people that loved her. Cases like these remind us how critical it is to recognize the warning signs of domestic turmoil and to support those who may be silently in danger. They also highlight the incredible work of investigators, from the detectives and digital forensic analysts to the DNA experts, who painstakingly piece together truth from the darkest of circumstances.
We want to thank you, our listeners, and our live audience here on Chatter Social for joining us for this deep dive into Ana Walshe's case. It has been a difficult story to cover, but it's an important one to discuss. And here at Debate the News True Crime, our mission is not only to recount these cases factually, but to examine the tough questions they raise about justice, society, and human behavior. And our hearts go out to Anna's family and everyone who cared about her. We hope that in telling her story, we honor her memory and perhaps help others to recognize the signs before tragedy strikes.
Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and take care of yourselves and each other. We wish you a very happy and safe New Year's, and we'll see you in 2026 with a brand new episode of Debate the News True Crime, The Disappearance of Natalee Holloway, premiering Thursday, January 8th. Happy New Year and good night.